Welcome back to another episode of Consciously Clueless. You're here because you want to learn about how to live a healthier life, how to live more sustainably, how to take your everyday actions and make them work for you and the planet. Sometimes it might feel like you've got this figured out, and other times you probably feel lost. That's why I'm here. Together, we will learn how to live happier, healthier lives without the need to be perfect, and always allowing space for a little cluelessness on this journey to living a more conscious life. Today on the podcast, I talk to Yvette Baker. Yvette is devoted to exposing and analyzing the intersections of human and non-human oppression through an Afro-Indigenous lens. Yvette is a wise soul, and I can't wait for you to hear this conversation. This podcast is sponsored by TerraSeed. TerraSeed is on a mission to disrupt the vitamin industry, empower vegans, and reduce plastic waste in the world. They put everything plant-based people struggle to get in an all-inclusive, vegan, compostable package multivitamin that replenishes them and our planet every single day. Seriously, y'all, win, win, win. Even if you're not vegan, this vitamin will help you get those key nutrients that you need. I am so excited to share a discount code for your first purchase. Use code CARLY50 at checkout to get 50% off. Again, that's CARLY50 for 50% off your first purchase at terraseed.com. Don't forget this code so they know I sent you. Where are you at right now? If it was a spectrum from clueless to conscious, what are you feeling right in this moment?
Oh my God. Right now in this moment, the more I almost I hadn't learned, ignorance bliss. And I'm not turning back, but the deep to, a lot of the things that I think we'll be discussing, and it also makes you realize how much work there is to actually be done and how much solidarity is actually required for the things that we're working towards. We can't do it alone, whether it's vegans, non-vegans, environmentalists, whatever you're doing, you really do need the support of other liberation movements. Yeah. As for me, I'm okay. I'm empowered. I'm hopefully empowering others along the way. But, I definitely have my days where I'm more of a one and and then days where, I feel like a badass. I would say 10 out of 10 because I'm doing all that I can,
Yes, yes. I think that acknowledging that there's going to be both, right? Like acknowledging that there's going to be both days and that they're both valid is a really important tool in liberation work.
100%. Mm-hmm.
And I was looking at your Instagram and your bio specifically. I was like, okay, Afro-Indigenous, total liberationist, social critic, your average rat lady. Like, can we just unpack each one? I was like, I want to know more about that. I would love to know more about that. I was like, this is the perfect bullets points right here. She set it up for me.
Oh, well, we can start with the fun stuff, work our way from the bottom up. I think that after all that seriousness, or which can come off a little intimidating or like, wait, what? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
But, I love rats. Rats are my favorite animal. If I have a favorite, they would be rats.
Why rats? Can I ask? Where did that come from?
I mean, they're cute as have always been cute as hell to me. They're super clever. They love food. I love food. I'm clever. They're cheeky. I don't know. I look at them and I could just cry looking at them. They're just so sweet. And I think that's something to do with the fact that they're so misunderstood and underrepresented and, who we're fighting for, as opposed to cats and dog bunnies and things. I feel like rats are really left out of the picture. They're some of the most exploited animals, along with fish. And I feel like somebody really needs to stand for them. But really, I've always thought they were super cute. So I'm a rat lady. I've helped rescue rats and raise rats pretty much all my life.
That's what my other question was going to be. It was like, is this a love from afar? Or are you like, oh yeah, I've got you want to see Albert right now? Like, I'm like,
I rescued a cat a couple years ago. So like rats are pretty much out of the picture for the minute. Cause I think my cat would not be so great with that. But But yeah,
Turns out
they're
being a
still.
cat lady is a different thing than a rat lady.
Oh yeah, very different. And I'm not a cat lady. I have two huge rat tattoos on my back. I'm fully dedicated. And as young age, my first animal rights, welfare activism surrounded rat care, rats at pet stores. Where so I got a few pet stores to change their bedding, and then also a lot of rats that didn't get sold are being thrown into the tribe. And so it was able to convince some of the owners to release rats to me, just give me a phone call if ever there was a surplus, and I would take care of them. So
Oh,
that's all
wow.
started.
How old were
Yeah,
you?
8 years old.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. So you were like animal liberationist from the get.
Something like that. I mean, I didn't really remove animals from my plate until many years
Right.
later, but as for the rest of that bio, I consider myself Afro-Indigenous. That's just my background,
Hmm.
culturally. So, and total liberation is my politic. So that is rooted essentially in anti-oppression, but it stands for anarchism, and it's anti-colonial, and it's anti-capitalistic. And through that lens, it's a commitment to fight for earth and animal liberation. So I put that up there, make that clear where I stand. And I assume we might get into more of that later, but
Hmm.
total liberation is not to be confused with collective liberation. The two are similar, but they're not the same. And I
Mm.
think a lot of times, as it's become a popular buzz phrase, we sort of leave out that total liberation is very, very rooted in politics, and it is an anarchist sort of framework.
Hmm.
So, is that all I put in there?
Social
Afro-Indigenous,
critic.
total liberation, social critic. Oh man, I'd be popping off. I can't help myself. I just critique anything and everything. I'm also very inspired by social critics and a lot of Black revolutionary thinkers from the past, a lot of whom had social criticisms in their work. I think it's super important as far as like reassessing things, and not just taking things as are. We keep learning, we're learning from one another, but sometimes, often, I think it is valuable to step back and kind of, you know, make sure that we're really, using the language that we want to use, make sure it's not outdated. Haven't, like, as a society, kind of progressed past some of these thoughts,
Hmm.
and there's new ways of thinking that sometimes are just more helpful for new situations at hand. Some really, really great thoughts from really great thinkers were really appropriate at that time, that don't exactly do the best justice, I think, for our own times. So the
Mm.
social criticism is always an important part of my work.
So the last part of that I didn't list when I listed your bio before, is the Liberation 360, and
Yeah.
that is also something I'd love to dive into. But I think a good place to start, since we started with the rat story and kind of can see maybe some progression happening here. But vegan abolitionist, what's your vegan story? Where did you arrive at veganism?
Well, I of course, I feel like I'd be remiss for anyone who sees plant-based dieting and veganism as one and the same. So,
Hmm.
as you ask me this question, I intend to answer it as uh, a socio-political stance and
Hmm.
anti-oppression and qualification of any being. That sort of veganism base, versus just a shift in my diet. So,
Hmm.
uh, unlike most folks, my vegan journey, if you will, I didn't really start with a dietary shift.
Mm.
What I put on my plate was actually the last piece of the puzzle that I
Mm.
needed to come to terms with. And so far as standing fully in my anti-oppression work and belief system, because I'd been a social justice hit pretty much my whole life. So,
Mhm.
and I was raised in a house infused with a lot of Native American culture. So I
Mm.
was taught to regard animals as community members along with the
Mhm.
earth. So, I talked about doing some animal welfareism work as a child, and I can't ever remember that animals should have to suffer for our fashion or entertainment. But it wasn't until about 15 years until my career in food and hospitality and wine that I helped open a plant-based restaurant. and it was upscale, and I was eating well. And because of financial necessity, I was like, I'm taking all this free food home.
Hell yeah.
I became that base sort of, accidentally or just circumstantially. Begins around me daily, and it all came to me quickly, the realization that there really was no justification for causing more harm when I had the option to cause less.
Mm-hmm.
So, I kind of already had a vegan ethos, but removing animals from the plate was the last piece. And the activism then from then on incorporated. And I would say around 2020, when a lot of Black, Indigenous, just people of color in general, I think got more of a highlighted platforms, if you will, after the social uprisings.
Mm-hmm.
That's when, I got a few spotlights and thought, well, since people are looking in my direction, I think I should really say something. And I so resonated with the animal rights community. I fell in love with working with so many activists I'd never met before. It kind of became the focal point of my work, which was a surprise to me. I just thought, animals should be included, but I realized how many voices are missing from their fight, how many human voices should be standing alongside them in their struggle and are not, that I felt obligated to, I think, just stand where I felt most needed, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
why animal liberations, quote unquote, took over, I guess, and most of
Right.
the work we do now. Yeah.
And so you're saying, having that ethos before really looking at your plate, I'm assuming then that made your activism grow in a different way as you kind of included that piece, right? So is that where we're coming to this like total liberation?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it grew. It grew insofar as like making sure that I really stood in a consistent anti-oppression truth. That was really my politic, that I was really understanding structural hierarchies, and I was really working to dismantle them, because I think without animals in the picture, we're leaving out the baseline. We're leaving out like the foundation. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
none of my activism wasn't really radical. I'm really looking at the root, and I feel like animals sort of lie at the root of so much of our worldly oppression. And I understand when those who argue that it's in fact maybe anti-blackness or something else, or sexism, and all of that is fine. But the way we commodify life itself, the way we commodify animals, I feel like is beneath all of that. Really, I feel like they're the blueprint for all of this. The fact that there's a lesser than, greater than, and othering. I think it starts with them. So it did really change my activism and make sure that I'm always checking myself, and I'm always growing, and I'm always learning, and pushing to
Mm-hmm.
do better.
That's interesting. I haven't heard it described particularly with those words in terms of the abuse of animals as a blueprint for this kind of othering of society and this ability to put people into different categories and value them differently.
Absolutely.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I find so too. I can't remember where I first heard it. And I want to say Christopher Sebastian, maybe, who does brilliant work, and I've listened to so many of his speeches, but so it may be from him. But essentially, along the way, I learned that even the Atlantic slave trade, that there wouldn't have been humans being sent across the seas to be slaves had it not been for animals first. Like they were the litmus tests. They were commodified and mass produced and enslaved sort of to for profit, and then
Wow.
humans were after that. So it really was kind of eye opening, and in that world of realizing the interconnectivity of Black liberation and animal liberation too. That's a whole other world, but it really ties in. I really do believe that's just one example of
Right.
the way animals kind of really are at the bottom of our heels and get overlooked in all of this anti-oppression work, which is a shame.
Can we talk a little bit more about that connection between Black liberation and animal liberation and the connection between those two movements? Can we talk a little bit more about that?
Woo! Oh my goodness. Sure.
You're like,
Oh
do
man.
you have the time though?
Oh no, I mean, it's just speaking of, Christopher Sebastian, I'm like, oh, he's brilliant. I mean, in the interconnectivity too, the connection, I think, was very like on a fundamental level. I think before I really started diving into his work 3 or 4 years ago, maybe. We've heard of intersectionality, as a concept, and a lot of folks, I think, are maybe on board and not on board about, bringing animals into that equation, because it was, the coin was turned by a Black woman and
Right.
for other forms of oppression. But I think when we regard animal liberation or animal oppression, and we look at the ways that animals have been treated, we can see how many times in history, not us, we're not making the comparisons between the two, but the oppressors, how many times animals have been oppressed in the same way and by the same folks as Black folks were oppressed, whether it was like the same kind of experimentation and being compared to certain animals as being appropriate to test upon, for example, and putting us into, prisons or zoos, if you want to look at it that way, the same kind of prison industrial complex. I think the two have so many parallels that we don't talk about. I did read a book that talked about the parallel by Christy Alger, who goes by Writing Liberation on Instagram. She wrote a book that's incredible, talks about those two parallels. At any rate, I feel like we are just sort of remiss of all the things that these Black radical thinkers were talking about as far as how structural oppression operates and how collective liberation operates. It was Fannie Lou Hamer who said, no one's free until we're all free, or, I'm paraphrasing, but when we really hold those words in true regard, it's like so many Black thinkers have, we cannot do the same thing to animals and think that we are going to be free. Also, so much of animal oppression ties directly back into Black and brown communities with the way that, factory farming operates, and the way that we're, environmental racism is, playing a huge part in animal agriculture, whether it be the farmers themselves or the pollution that's being created and running into our neighborhoods and polluting our air and our water, and making massive, health destruction in our communities. And I can't imagine a world where we're making progress that we want to see, but we have trillions of beings being exploited right beneath us, because it's affecting us directly in so many ways. I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg. And, I don't believe I can even do that topic justice. And it's a hard conversation for a lot of people because there's so many reasons why, unjustly Black folks are still compared to animals and still treated as lower beings. And so to talk about the two in tangent is really hard. It's hard, but I think it's necessary. But I think the key is to look into the work like Christopher Sebastian, but also look into the work of most Black animal rights advocates, because I feel like these are conversations that can be had within community with love and respect, versus, having to hear it from some random, white PETA or anonymous for the voiceless activist who may say something really offensive, and also just not be genuine and and believing in both struggles. They're kind of co-opting one to make a point for the other, and nobody got time for that. That's not the messenger we need. But it's right,
because that's not authentic.
No, not at all. But it is important to talk about. There's a lot to talk about regarding the two, and I've made posts about that, specifically this, on my Instagram page, because I do feel it's really important, the connection between Black liberation and animal liberation. Very, very important to dive into that.
So I imagine as a woman of color in this movement, in all of the movements that we're talking about, right? But specifically talking about Black liberation and vegan liberation, has that ever been an isolating place to be? Have you had pushback from other people of color that are not liking that? Like, I'm wondering how that is for you to navigate.
Yes, pushback is real. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating. And I continue the education that partly because of that, because I
Mm-hmm.
think that understanding more is very helpful. But then I also understand when folks like myself opt out. I'm
Right.
not here to twist anyone's arm or to convince them that somehow they need to manage taking on more, in addition to what they already face. So I'm not really walking into Black brown communities saying like, hey, we need to do more for animals.
Right.
I'm opening up to anyone who has the capacity, anyone who can listen, and anyone who can do better. But that's not to write off anyone just because they're Black or brown or because they might be in a poor community. I do think it's important that we get the education. We're not ramming anything down anyone's throats, but this is adversely affecting so many of us. So it's not that, oh, leave poor people alone or leave Black people alone. Like, we need to call in our own, and we
Mm.
need to understand these issues and how, banding together can make it can make it all very successful, no matter what we're focused on. But yeah, I mean, oh man, you get angry folks, angry messages, not quite even understanding where we're coming from. They
Mm.
won't, they've heard enough, white vegan rhetoric,
Mm-hmm.
and they think that you're coming with that mess. And they're like, you're about to tell me, but we're all animals, so we just, I'm like, that's not, that's like the long and short of a lot of messaging out there. And I'm like, oh God, I'm so sorry, but that's not exactly the Kool-Aid I'm sipping on. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um so yeah, it's tough. It's important. It's tough. It's at the moment not the focal point of my work because I'm not in the space of veganizing people. I'm kind of
Mm.
in the space of I'm sorry if there's loud noise on my end from all the downtown LA noise.
Mm.
I'm not in the space of veganizing people. I am in more of the space of taking vegan activists and having hard conversations about getting more involved in systemic activism and things that we can do to see tangible results as time kind of winds down with our environmental health here with climate, with climate change. And so I feel like there's bigger moves we can make rather than standing in the street,
Mm.
with signs. I'm trying to get more of us involved in lobbying and involved in political activism. Um, there's a group of activists, including myself. We're kind of looking at full-time and part-time DC ventures to get
Oh,
into office.
wow.
Yeah, we're really trying to. It's like it feels like do or die.
Yeah.
U.S. Farm Bill is coming out next year in September, and it'll set the stage for so many years of spending. And it's if these ranchers, cowboys all get their way, it has devastating effects. There's really no one standing from the vegan angle working on these issues. There's other social justice movements who are very well aware of what the Farm Bill means, as far as our future, but vegans aren't really there. They're not really showing up. So my work is rooted in trying to get activists to show up.
So I think that's really interesting. You're saying like my, we need people at all levels, and what I'm doing is not trying to make non-vegans vegans. What I'm trying to do is talk to vegans who are already committed and make them do better.
Right. Right. And I don't think that I call it cultural work, is a social, it's a social work, social political movement, the social part, the social piece, the earthling ed stuff, if you will, talking to people, debating people. That's great. It changes lives. It changes individual lives. But, at the rate of population growth and what's happening with the effects of our capitalistic ways and the way we commodify everything and the way that we cause a lot of destruction. I don't think that there's time enough to veganize one by one.
Mm.
Um, I really don't see it. So I think it is better time spent trying to change policy, because even if you veganize someone, we're not in a fair supply demand fight. So that's great that somebody went vegan because they heard a lecture, but then they're at the store buying plant milk thinking they're saving cows. And that's just not the reality. That's not the way our food system works. And, the more we're aware of that, the more I think, will be empowered to mobilize and do something about the fact that we're not making the difference that we want to make, that our divestment from animal products and animal exploitation is only symbolic, and that our taxes are being used to support all the things that we're against, whether that be animal agriculture or animal testing or what have you. We fund that. We fund that just as much as non-vegans. So we would like to see that a different version, a different world, or our taxes going for things we actually believe in. Then we have to be there. We either have to be the politicians ourselves, or we have to be the ones influencing them to hear our voices and to know that we're mighty, that we're a larger group than people think, and that it's tied into environmentalism and all the other issues that are being heard right now as we're kind of on the back burner.
That's I think we need to highlight that point for myself and for listeners, right? Like, you go to the store and you get your oat milk and you're like, great, I saved a cow. And you're and I think that too, right? I'm like, thank gosh, I'm saving all these animals by being vegan. That's one perk. And I talk about that even. And the way you just said that is such a reminder of like, that's cute, but you're in a larger system that is more complicated than choosing your milk and making like wild differences. That's a lot to swallow.
It is a lot. It was frankly, a depressing realization for me. We had been told, you stop buying, they'll stop supplying. And and it's frankly a really big sort of misinformation campaign. It sounds great, just go vegan, but it's not the truth yet. I mean, it's not the reality we're in. And we know that focusing our energy solely into protesting and trying to get people to go vegan one by one keeps our movement running in place. With mega farms of the animal agricultural industries receiving massive government bailouts, subsidies, insurances, vegans and their spending power may grow, but with a rigged and corrupt system, it doesn't grant us a fair supply and demand fight. So, we are also highlighted that small farms are going out of business, and it's because of all the plant milks you see on the shelves. And that's just not the reality either. You have a lot of small farms going out of business because they cannot compete with the larger farms who not only receive extraordinary funds, but who also scam extraordinary funds. And that is the work right now of Agriculture Fairness Alliance, which is a vegan-backed lobbying group. And they are exposing, like no other, how exactly fraudulent the meat and dairy industries have been in stealing funds and diverting funds away from where they were meant to be, and level the playing field, fruit and vegetable farmers, Black and brown farmers included. But they are hoarding and scamming, and it is like a welfare scheme beyond your wildest dreams. Like $800 billion, I believe there was a COVID bailout fund for farmers, and yeah, these mega farms are just milking it all up and creating fraudulent entries, pretending like they're additional farms, getting multiple payments. So like no matter what we're really doing, they are not feeling the effects of our losses. The sales are only going up. They go in production year after year after year. So it's not that we think would be correlated to how the shelves have been diversified to include vegan food. It's really symbolic. It really is just vegan capitalism, and it's really not the way toward liberation for anyone.
This podcast is supported by Will's Vegan Store. Will's Vegan Store has been a vegan company at the front of vegan clothing and sustainable fashion since they launched in 2013 by their founder, Will Green. They produce the most beautiful, vegan, sustainably made shoes, clothing, and accessories. I have been obsessed with this brand for years now. They were one of the first vegan brands that I really made the switch to. It can be hard to thrift shoes, but I love knowing that if I'm going to purchase a pair of shoes from Will's Vegan Store, they are going to be ethically made, their workers are protected, they don't use plastic packaging, they're delivered in an environmentally friendly way. It's truly the most amazing company to support. So if you're ready to try them yourself, hit the link in the show notes so they know that I sent you. This podcast is supported by Who Gives a Crap. Who Gives a Crap is an eco-friendly toilet paper company that donates 50% of its profits to help ensure everyone has access to clean water and a toilet within our lifetime. Who Gives a Crap has donated almost $8 million to nonprofit organizations who help provide clean water and toilets all over the world. Who Gives a Crap is delivered straight to your door with carbon neutral delivery. I love that it comes that way. I don't have to think about it. It's an automatic subscription, and I want you to try it. You can check out Who Gives a Crap and get $10 off your first order over $54 with the code CARLY10. That's CARLY 10, or check out the link in the show notes.
So I would love to talk through a little bit. I think it's a good segue, given what you just said about like vegan capitalism and kind of symbolic, to talk about white veganism.
Oh.
And
I crack like, my knuckles.
Yeah, I was like, let me rearrange how I'm sitting here and get ready. But I think that it's an important conversation to continue to have, even though there's, as we can see on the internet, a lot of people that don't want to hear that. A lot of white vegans that do not want to hear this conversation. But I know that you post about it, pretty frequently in calling that out. So let's talk a little bit about white vegans like me.
Well, we can talk about it, but I really want to clarify that white veganism doesn't mean veganism from white people.
Right.
You can be a white person and a vegan and not be steeped in any white vegan rhetoric. And yes, I do. It's more of a like a way that you're going about your activism. It's a really messed up, problematic belief system and activism series of events that kind of
feels like white feminism adjacent.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's something that I went into a few times in my social media for sure. I have a pinned post on it because I thought it was important. It's important, and then it's not important. And I think I talked about that as well. And I think it's not important because it will always be, we're not going to get them all. Not only that, but I think that there's so many large organizations that are reliant on selling particular lies and coming forth with a particular activism style that attracts certain people so that they feel like white savior. It's kind of in the white savior realm where, people don't want to work and they don't want to, understand collective liberation, and they don't want to understand how oppression actually operates. They'd rather just feel good about it.
Making a difference, but it to be easy.
Absolutely. And so I think I provided probably the world's longest definition of like what white veganism is on my post. And, I can hit you with a little snippet of it because it's important to understand what we're talking about it. But it's essentially a form of veganism that's rooted in white supremacy and refers to a culture that disregards marginalized voices from the mainstream vegan discourse while centering white voices and creating white saviors, as we discussed. Its white-dominated leadership has allowed racism, misogyny, anti-Semitism, transphobia, weightism, and ableism to thrive within the animal liberation movement so long as it has been for the animals. This culture fervently insists on apolitical, issue activism, which is animals only, and hyper focuses on individualism, and as a result has a morally sound anti-speciesist animal liberation struggle buried and lost in the mainstream perception of vegans as classist, exclusionary, purist, aggressive, and compassionless, caring far more about the plight of non-humans than anyone else. So I sort of I opened with that, and it's important to understand. I didn't think I could really paraphrase because I didn't want to miss anything.
No, that's important. It's helpful to hear. It's helpful to hear all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that
Copy paste.
Copy paste. So there's that. But I also talked about how it's important, and I create work highlighting what white veganism is and where it shows up for three important reasons. And one was because non-vegans, especially non-vegans of color, are continually cite issues indicative of white veganism as an excuse to ignore animals. That is terrible and problematic and unnecessary. Two, that there's proponents of white veganism that refuse to listen and do better. And right, so thereby rationalizing non-vegans' dismissal of our movement for supporting non-humans. And three, pro-intersectional spaces, you see a fair amount of advocacy tactics and doctrine clearly informed by white veganism, most notably the spreading of disinformation campaigns, which are things that sound correct and perpetually repeated to support our arguments. So, without understanding this is the thing, this is a component that white supremacy has creeped into our movement, then it can stifle our work. It can stifle those of us who are doing the actual work and sort of get shielded by white veganism, not taken seriously. There has to be a distinction. And I see activists of color making that distinction all the time and saying, hey, you're talking about white veganism. This isn't what veganism is. This isn't what we stand for. We're an anti-oppression movement. We are not any of this other stuff. We're not calling people out on their lifestyle or saying I'm holier than thou. We're not doing that. We're doing so much work that is so integral to other social justice movements, and we're not taken seriously because of this mess, because of white veganism. So it's very important to identify what it is, help some of those who care to dismantle that belief system within themselves, and also to make others see that there's a separation, and as long as they're standing on the right side of what veganism actually is, actually the liberation struggle that it actually is, then we can move forward and hopefully move together and get some stuff done.
Yeah, I think it's so clear. I mean, I definitely came into being vegan, one, thinking of it as a diet first. And that's kind of what got me there. And two, just obviously like steeped in my own privilege and unpacking that and figuring that out. And the evolution of what veganism means to me, I mean, that's still happening. And and I'm still learning and hopefully, plan to continue on with that, not ever stopping that journey. But I think it's so clear to see how once you step back, how much of a distraction it is, how much these like few vegan talking heads that are, white bodied aren't doing anything, aren't doing anything.
Well, they're getting some clout. They get donations. They get to be the face of the movement, and that's fine. So is the world. We take white male voices, seriously, and everybody else is just complaining about something. So we have a little bit of that mentality going on. But what you just said, it really resonates with me as well. And a lot of activists of color, I don't mean to, create the impression that we all just get it straight away because we're Black folks or Indigenous folks. We stumble onto veganism and then, have it quote unquote, perfectly. There's no perfect veganism first, but also a lot of us, are exposed, as I was, into white veganism first. And I also perpetuated some of that mess. And, I was foaming at the mouth like everybody else when they first
Ooh,
go vegan,
yeah.
and pointing fingers and like wanting to shake people. Like, why can't you
Not cute. It was not a cute look.
make the connection?
Go
All
do
that nonsense.
it.
So, and then we evolve when you really care to, look into what has been done in other liberation movements and where we
Right.
can borrow and learn from them. Then you really see how leftist our movement is, and how political it should be, not turning anyone away because they're not vegan. Everyone's an important piece of the puzzle. And it's like, and a lot of that stuff just never comes to light for so many people because they just want to stay in place. They just want to say, go watch Dominion, and you'll get it or whatever.
Yeah, no,
So
truly. I
uh,
mean, I've had to leave a few Facebook groups and such, as I think we all have had to over the years. Because I can't handle it. Like, you want to be like in the inside and making comments, but then I got, oh my gosh, I don't even remember what group, some vegan group, because it's nice to be a part of them. And then I share the podcast and I'm like, hey, yo, listen. But it is not
mhm.
always worth it, because
No.
there was like this question that you had to answer to get into the group. And one of them was like, would you buy non-vegan food for a friend or family member? And I said, yes, because like my mom was sick the other day and I went and bought her some things that she wanted because she was sick that weren't vegan, but that's not why I was there, right? Like that kind of idea.
Mhm.
And I didn't like it. I didn't like how it felt, but that's not my journey. I was
Mhm.
doing something for a family member. And somebody messaged me a page long attack about how I cannot call myself vegan, and it was some white girl, obviously. I mean, obviously it was.
All right, we already knew that.
We knew that. And she was pissed. And I was just like, I took screenshots and I was like, I shared it on Instagram and was like, this is the problem with like whiteness in this space and with like this whole issue, is that if you don't leave room to learn and to have nuance, then what the hell are you doing?
Mhm. I mean, been there, been there. I totally understand. Um, and it doesn't, my whether I would or would not do what you did for, a sick person is
Mm-hmm.
irrelevant. It blows my mind that there is no room for nuance, and all above that, that we're trying to call in other humans to make this realization. We're trying to, this is, I mean, it is an animal struggle and we are their allies. However,
Mm-hmm.
we're creating our own movements with other humans, but we fail to connect with humans or have any desire,
That
any spirit
part.
whatsoever to relate to other humans, or to be empathetic, like in any way. Again, it's going back to, wanting to be right and wanting to, feel holier than thou when it doesn't make sense. And it literally, I mean, going back to what we were just talking about supply demand, it also just doesn't matter. It really doesn't. You didn't kill an extra cow or chicken or pig. You just didn't. You really didn't. And nor did their Beyond Burger, Impossible Burger, Miyoko cheese. It didn't save anyone. So obviously, the biggest problem with all of this is that it turns people away,
Right.
and they don't even get to a place where they are understanding what's happened because they are completely taken aback by a lot of our behavior with a vegan label on it.
Right.
So that's unfortunate. And another reason why, we talk about white veganism, because when we run into that, we want to know what it is. And when we're ready
Right.
to open up and include animals in our liberation struggles, then we can go to better sources, hopefully, than Facebook groups with angry white ladies on them. You know,
I don't know if
yeah.
I'm ever ready for that day, but yeah. I think it's also very clear that this has informed you being a co-founder, am I correct, of Liberation 360?
I'm not. It was founded by Connie Spence, who's my mentor.
Okay.
Uh, She is, yeah, she's a total liberation activist, vegan advocate, food system expert. So I am really new into food system knowledge. I mean, as vegans, we get the stats, we hear a lot of the basics, but as far as like food policy and food supply chain and the corruption that's hiding behind our food, policies, the loopholes and whatnot, Connie has been really instrumental in all of that for me. She founded both Liberation 360 and Agriculture Fairness Alliance. So
Okay.
Liberation 360 is essentially the educational arm to get us involved, get us in the know, to be able to, mobilize and centralize vegan voters and get us politically involved, which is the realm of Agriculture Fairness Alliance. So I feel like because we're such a small group, there's three founders of Liberation 360, myself, Connie Spence, and Gwenna Hunter. It feels it feels co-founder-ish, but I cannot take any credit. She did all the work, but the three of us, we have a very symbiotic relation. We do so much work that's compatible and that really melds together seamlessly. We need one another.
Yeah.
So with all three pieces, we really all take our individual place and we make it work.
So what does your work with them look like?
Well, it's because of this shift towards DC for myself included. Much of the focus has been towards the Agriculture Fairness Alliance, but on the educational side, we're trying to demystify. I've been picking up as a teacher and a student. Everything that I learn is geared towards demystifying the history and functioning of our food system, giving an audience that education so that we kind of feel like more well equipped and and approaching the issues that they use and like those as well. And on the ground, until subsidies change and we make plant-based food more accessible, we support our affected communities by addressing food insecurity, inaccessibility, waste. We provide food and financial help in the form of groceries to children and young adults who are an otherwise unsupported group. Many of whom would like to be vegan but lack the autonomy to do so with growth decisions made by their parents. I have a program called Fed Up that I help run that supports young activists, and I am sort of the direct relationship between our organization and a lot of local businesses, a lot of local farmers, and Black and brown vendors, to get them involved in what we're doing and finding out how we can support them. So I have a background also working in local farmers markets myself. I know how much food waste comes out of farmers markets, a shocking amount of goods that can't be sold the next week. So they just go into the bin, overflowing trash bins, tell you. So creating a relationship can kind of put those food into people's mouths as opposed to in the bin. And there's some larger organizations doing similar work there, but not in a vegan space and not within the same framework. So one of our founders as well, or excuse me, not one of our board members of Liberation 360 did found the first vegan food bank in Los Angeles. So it's all there. Yeah. So myself creating the relationship with the farmers, getting food to, children and young adults, and Gwenna, holding down the food bank, getting food to anyone in the communities who need to be supported, and Connie doing all the data crunching and getting all the information really tied together and demystified for me to sort of simplify and relate to our audiences is kind of like, it's a well-oiled machine for us. But yeah, so I'm more of the relation face-to-face person with the farmers and the vendors.
That sounds amazing. It sounds like an organization that will hopefully continue to grow. I imagine like chapters around the country, and I'm sure those are things you've thought about, obviously. But as you're saying that, I was like, that needs to be everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, and I would love to see it grow. I would love to see other chapters, but I would also just love it to do what it was meant to do, which aside from supporting communities in the moment, it's really meant to mobilize us.
Mm,
It's really just meant to be the catalyst to get us more people involved in the political stuff so that we don't keep running in place,
yeah.
we have a hand in changing policy and restructuring the food system actually is, you know so that's what I hope it does. And so if people don't want to be involved with Liberation 360, that's fine. You can skip over that and go straight to Agriculture Fairness Alliance and, register for the Vegan Voter Hub and become a member and find out how you can either support the lobbyists there or, get involved in our training / incubation program to become a
Mm.
lobbyist yourself, which I may be facing very shortly. I can't say for certain, but there's a good chance that I will be registered as a lobbyist myself. And
That'll be part 2 of our interview
oh
someday.
yeah, vegan lobbyist, Yvette. Here we go. I
Yes.
never saw my life in that direction, but
Life is funny, isn't it?
isn't it though?
So given all of the amazing shit you're doing, like seriously, I forget, I say this all the time, but I forget sometimes that I don't share the audio or that I don't share the video of these podcasts. And then people don't see that I'm sitting here just like, damn, like, oh my God, or just like shaking my head. I'm like, I wish people could just see my face being like, yes, all the time when I'm listening to people. And that feels very similar to you. I'm truly in awe of the work you're doing and really am grateful for it. But given all that, how do you take care of yourself?
Ooh, self-care combo. Well,
If you're up for it, if you're up for
well,
it.
well. Uh, you know, I'll say it. I'm new to self-care. I'm
Mm-hmm.
brand new. I'm a newbie.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a mistake. That's been a mistake for me.
I
And
made a mistake.
I'm a mistake. So now we're correcting that mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And rest. I do take days off. Mine keeps spinning. I'm working on, once you know about all of this, it's really hard to unsee it. We're in a non-vegan world. So every time I go outside, there are clear reminders of, exploitation and oppression everywhere. So in that way, self-care is tough because I get constant reminders. But I love dancing. I
Mm.
love trying new cuisine. I love socializing. I love going out with girls. And so I allow myself to do all these things and I really schedule them in. I don't
Yeah.
say like later. I just plug them in. And I mentioned Connie Spence earlier, my mentor. She's also become a great friend. She also really holds me accountable and says, "Hey, we're going out on Tuesday. We're going out next Thursday," and then I do it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we always, the board members of Liberation 360, we have at least one dinner outing a month. We go to a nice vegan restaurant and we unwind and we can sort of shoot the shit, if I can say that, and just have a cackle and not take everything so seriously. So that's super important. And so like just showing up to actually do it is so new to me. And
Mm.
also working a little bit less. I was working 7 days a week for many, many, many years. That's not a flex, not cool. It's the grind is not cool,
Yeah.
but it was my reality out of necessity.
Yeah.
And so now that I'm moving away from that, I show up to the things that bring me joy. So whatever brings you joy, you just got to make sure you arrive at that joy, whatever
Mm.
it is.
Yes.
And it's easier said than done. It's way easier said than done, especially because I always feel like, oh, there's more to do and time is running out and all those things. But, if I overwhelm myself, then I'm out of the game. So my longevity is dependent on taking care of myself. So that's what I'm doing.
That is such an important lesson, like circle, underline, bold, all of that is what I'm still learning too, is that if I burn myself out, I'm worthless. So taking care, like, is it Audre Lorde that said taking care of yourself is an act of rebellion? And
I love you quoted Audrey.
and that, and that is something that I think of often. Like, okay, like it's rebellious actually to continue on self-care, not just like baths and whatever, although I'm a big slut for a bath, but like not just that, right? Like, but the real stuff. And that
Yeah.
is an ongoing lesson. So I appreciate you saying that you're still learning and being like, yeah, self-care isn't just something that like is handed to us and we understand to do it, especially depending on our life circumstances, right? It's often something we're learning as adults, like, oh, taking care of yourself is important.
Right. It's important. And I like what you just said because, yeah, it's also a privilege in some ways.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we have to recognize that. And yeah, if we have the means, it's a must. I always feel like my ancestors too, they're like, it's a must.
Yes.
So many of them may have not had that privilege. And that's all they would really want from me. I know this. They would want me to take care of myself. They would not want the weight of the world on my shoulders. I'm sure they're proud of me for doing what I can do, but I know that they're behind me and wanting to soothe me and have me take care of myself. So I do just that.
Yeah. Ooh, full body chills. That was, yeah, that's good. Is there anything that you've wanted to share with listeners that I haven't given you space to do so?
I think that we have covered so much goodness. I guess you hear about total liberation, collective liberation. The only thing that I think that is worth mentioning, because I'm seeing these phrases so much more, and I think that a lot of people have the impression that it's new and buzz phrasey and whatnot, but really collective liberation is so rooted in so many indigenous cultures that the health of all the beings around you in the earth is really tied into your own health, your own freedom, and these are very, very old paradigms. And even as such, I think a lot of these phrases now are being adopted by all sorts of activists, even those activists who haven't yet come to include animals in their anti-oppression stance. And I would love to mention that animal liberation, or veganism, if you will, and a lot of people won't, but is integral to our success. It's integral to total liberation and what collective liberation means. And it's not only nonsensical to exclude trillions of beings, but it is counterproductive for all the ways that our exploitation and commodification of animals affects them and ourselves. So the more we realize that, or if we can be honest or have an open mind in approaching the work of total liberation activists who understand that animals are part of the equation, I think it's super, super important. And on a lighter note, sort of cringy just to see these phrases being thrown around without any real purpose or understanding. And I think it's important to recognize and it's important to recognize when things have been watered down, because that can be very dangerous. I think some of this is getting watered down, and it sounds nice, so people throw these words around, and not just in their bios, but wherever. And yeah, I think we should have a more rooted understanding of why these terms are so radical.
Right.
Radical in the real sense of the word, meaning, like focused on the root causes of oppression. And I don't believe you can, again, I don't believe you can look at root causes of oppression while ignoring animals.
Yes.
So full circle.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to make, because we see so many, especially like you said, after social uprisings and everything, we've seen all these different lanes of activism take off, pop up. Some are helpful, some are not, and making sure we understand the words we're either using or seeing is a lot more important than I think sometimes we realize.
Yes, absolutely. 100% agree. To summarize, we cannot only oppose some oppression. Doesn't work like that. So
yes, yes. There's the soundbite.
Yeah, it's all, yeah, essentially that.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for joining me. I really do hope we do a part 2 someday. I could talk to you for so much longer. I really enjoy your spirit and your work, and I'm excited to see what's next for you. And if we're looking at Yvette the Lobbyist here soon.
Woo! Oh my God. I don't know. Doing my best. It's a possibility. And yes, your listeners, by the way, are missing out on how genuine and warm and exciting your face and expressions are. How you just exude. I am like, oh, I love talking to you as well. So the visuals, yeah, definitely missing out, folks. But it's real.
Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. I have so enjoyed talking to you, and I can't wait to keep connecting.
Same. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Consciously Clueless. If you're enjoying this podcast, please subscribe, share with your friends, put it on social media. Don't forget to tag me. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Good Pods, leave a review. Reviews and shares help more people to see the podcast and join in on the fun. If you want to make sure to stay up to date on future episodes, follow me at Consciously Carly on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or Pinterest, and head to consciouslycarly.com to sign up for the newsletter. Ready for more conscious living content? Check out patreon.com/consciouslycarly and join the exclusive community over there. And finally, if you're ready to take better care of yourself and the world, let's work together. Click the link in the show notes to head to the website, find out more, and schedule a free discovery call with me. Chat soon! In 2016, Mint Mobile was born because its founders thought that big wireless was, well, dumb. So they decided it was time to create a smarter wireless company, one that extends its middle finger to conventional truths while also pointing out where big wireless is letting people down. They're online only. You can buy plans that are 3-month, 6-month, 12-month, no contracts. Choose to stay as long as you want. There are no overages. There's no surprises. There's just no BS. And for someone who lives in a remote area like myself, I can attest to the fact that the service is great, and I have truly had no problems, and oftentimes is better than the big wireless companies I was with before. To find out more about how Mint Mobile can work for you, hit the link in the show notes so they know that I sent you.